What's up, my cronies? For my second Let's Play, I wanted to do something that would be a little more obscure, something you probably haven't heard of. So I chose this game, Gunman's Proof, which was a game that came out for the Super Famicom in Japan in 1997, and obviously never made its way to America or Europe, due to the fact of, one, it being 1997, and the Nintendo 64 was already out and established in America, so the Japanese felt that there was not really a demand for more Super Nintendo games, even though there were, I believe, Kirby's Dream Land 3 came out in 1997 in America. So this game was released. I don't really think it was too popular, and I had never heard about it until a friend of mine told me about it, I think earlier this year. Maybe it was last year, I don't remember. But I tried it out back then and played through the first section of the game. I thought it was pretty good, but I, for some reason, didn't really go back to it. And so I figured I would give it a go here, and I figure it'd probably be a good game to Let's Play. Fairly interesting, relatively unknown, so could maybe help spread the word. So, as the intro cutscene said, and as is going on now, some years ago a meteor hit, not bringing Lavos, but bringing another agent of destruction to the world, or rather to the American Old West, as it were. So we meet our young boy, the unnamed protagonist, who I named Nick, after the great Nicolas Cage, who... I kind of have this thing where whenever you name a character, if they don't have an official name, I name him after Nicolas Cage, because I feel like he should be in about every video game ever made. So one day going out, young Nick sees this UFO that crashes to the ground, and you'll see what goes on from there. So a little about the game. I'd probably best describe it as a mix of dungeon crawling, kind of similar to the Legend of Zelda series, kind of similar to Link to the Past, traverse an overworld and go through dungeons, that is, but you fight with guns instead of a sword, hence the title Gunman's Proof. It's a top-down action game, and I kind of want to say kind of like Smash TV, but it's not like a dual button layout kind of thing where you just press the button you want to shoot. You actually have to aim in the directions you want to shoot, but you are shooting for your main attack. And then also I would compare it to having a similar art style and actually somewhat of a humor style of Earthbound. And also the fact that it's kind of how the Japanese perceived American culture, albeit only the wild, wild west. So take that description for what you will, and it might sound appealing to you. I know it definitely caught my attention immediately, despite the fact I didn't play it immediately. So, if you haven't gathered what the main point of the story is, Nick, the main hero, finds these two guys who their ship crash lands, and they team up together to take out the main villain, whose name is Demi, who, I guess, after crashing to Earth on the meteor, produces some, I guess, form of offspring or something, some monsters called Demi-Seed. And they've been plaguing this village and, I guess, all of the Wild West for quite a while. So I believe Space Sheriff Zero just said that he was going to have to possess the body of the main character, which is what is being discussed right now. So Zero, which is I believe the blue one or the red one, I don't really remember, it doesn't really matter because you don't really see them. One will join Nick, the other, Garo, I think his name is, basically just works on the ship the whole game, and you can talk to him and get information and whatever. but he doesn't really play a big role in the plot. So I guess now the opening cutscene is kind of drawing to a close, and we'll finally get to control the character in a little bit, after he goes home and talks with his parents, of course. So unfortunately, not much happens in this first episode of the Let's Play, so I guess I'm gonna do my best to just talk about the game in general, so that I don't have to do that when actual things are going on. And maybe before we get too into the game, you can make a decision if you would maybe like to play this for yourself. Maybe as I'm releasing episodes, maybe before you see the game. Because this being a Let's Play, I'll be showing just about everything the game has to offer. So I guess first things first, it was developed by a company called Lenar, L-E-N-A-R, who probably doesn't sound familiar to you, but if you are a fan of the Angry Video Game Nerd, you will recognize a certain game they've made called Deadly Towers, which is an awful, awful game. Okay, well, now I'll take a quick break to say, now we finally get to control the character. You can crawl around a little bit, which is pretty amusing and doesn't really serve any purpose except for, I think, in one dungeon in the game. But yeah, so generally from the rest of this video I'll be walking around the village, talking with random NPCs, and then ending the video right as soon as I actually leave the town again to go to the first dungeon. So Lenar made, for the NES, Deadly Towers, which was a horrible, horrible game, and managed to make a pretty decent, solid game this time around. And other games they've made is a game called Bird Week, which is a really boring looking game where you play a bird trying to give butterflies to your offspring, and you progress on over and over again and basically do the same thing. So now I'm going to take another quick break to say, now the main character is talking to his parents, and that's something that would probably have to be censored if it was released in America, because that didn't really fly with Nintendo of America back then. I know in Earthbound there's a reference to Porky being hit by his father at the beginning of the game that was changed from, man, my dad's gonna spank me bad, to like, man, I'm sure gonna get it for this. I mean, you knew he was still getting spanked, but didn't actually show it or anything. And as if once wasn't enough, he's about to get cussed at by his father and spanked again. And then eventually kicked out of the house. His father's kind of a jerk. So anyway, Lenar also made, I believe, a strategy game about Napoleon, I think, for the NES. And I made a couple other racing games and an RPG type game where it's like the battle system's kind of real time, and random battles, kind of like in Final Fantasy. It looked like it wasn't that great. And the game was published by ASCII Corp, I believe, if I'm getting that right, which is not to be confused with, ASCII Corp, which is a Japanese company, not to be confused with the American Standard Code for Information Interchange, which is basically just characters in a computer and stuff. So you save in this game by sleeping in bed, and that data file was the first one I talked about when I just basically went through the first dungeon. ASCII Corp really just, I think, produced games in Japan, so I can't really tell you anything that they've really been involved with except for this. But we're seeing this now, so yeah, like I said, I just really go along talking with NPCs. I go to the saloon, and I believe you actually learn a technique from this guy. Yeah, it's beneficial to talk to this guy. He basically teaches you a charge shot, which is useful for your main weapon, which has infinite ammo. Eventually you'll find weapons that have limited ammo but are much stronger. And for the most part you'll have those throughout the game, but whenever you're stuck with your pistol, the charge shot is pretty helpful. So I guess for the remaining time of the video, I'll kind of give a quick little overview of what I think of the game, because I'm doing post-commentary for this, so I've already beaten the game. So I can kind of give a fair assessment, once again, to maybe help you decide if maybe it'll be something you'd like to play. Like I said, it's kind of Zelda-esque, but with guns and stuff, and pretty good humor, and bright graphics, and a pretty good soundtrack. The dungeons are pretty short and straightforward. Whereas in Zelda dungeons, you typically have a lot of locked doors and chests and stuff with keys. In this game, there's no locked doors. So if, say, there's a big sprawling dungeon, as long as you know a quick way to get to the boss, you can go take out the boss and be done with it. So there's not much exploration required. There are some treasures inside of chests in the dungeons, but they don't really do anything except add to your score at the top, which is at 0 right now because I haven't done anything. And the score doesn't really matter. It's just kind of there. So the dungeons are kind of... some of them have pretty good layouts and stuff and are pretty interesting, and they are varied in layout and like scenery and stuff. But like I said, you can just kind of go to the boss really quickly. The game is pretty short and pretty easy. I've died a couple times in the game, but for the most part, like, also how it works is you have lives. I'll just say this right now, you have lives, and when you die, you'll get back up on the exact spot where you died and just continue on from there. Obviously, if you run out of lives, it's game over, and you can start at your last save, but I never had that problem, and never even really came close to having that problem throughout the game. It's pretty generous with lives. You typically get a life after every dungeon, so even if you die once during the dungeon, you will break even. And there's hidden lives throughout, and a couple enemies that actually drop lives, so you typically have quite a few lives. And like I said before when I was talking about weapons, you usually have one of the stronger weapons throughout the game, except of course for the first dungeon you don't have any really unlocked. You learn how to use the weapons from the guy at the gun store, who I don't know if I've talked to yet, but I'm pretty sure I talked to his wife, who said that basically the Demi-Seed stole a bunch of guns. They stole big bags of guns and are carrying them around, which is unfortunate for the gun store, but actually kind of fortunate for me because now I don't have to pay for weapons or whatever. This guy is a very, very stereotypical Chinese merchant. Speaks pretty broken English. Has some funny lines at some points. And you buy special upgrades from him, like you buy like a scuba set to swim. You buy a crucifix which wards off ghosts to access one dungeon. But we'll get there later. Much later. So for the game, it's pretty short, pretty easy, but it's overall pretty fun. And I'd recommend, if you're watching this maybe before the other episodes have come out in the Let's Play, I'd say give it a shot if you have a Super Nintendo emulator or whatever on your computer, which a lot of people do. Then by all means, feel free to give it a try. So I guess this kind of counts as walking around doing stuff, because down south of the village is really the only place I can access where I can actually shoot the gun and do stuff. Though there's no enemies on the beach yet. There will be later in the game. But so as you can see, I'm just walking around shooting. And the crabs on the beach do actually give a little bit of health, so if I had taken some damage, I could always go down there to replenish some health. And I think this one video is the one video I recorded where I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't really realize how to get out of the town, so I think I just talked to every NPC and eventually I got out. Though I think I can pester the dude blocking the way, and eventually he'll let me out. I think there are a few couple special NPCs I do have to talk to, like this guy's probably important to talk to, the guy at the gun store. But whatever. At this point I was just ready to play the game. But all the other videos I would actually go through and do the dungeon beforehand and then immediately replay it and record it so that I would already know the general layout, where to go, where some of the treasures were, so I didn't waste a lot of time. And one thing I will say about the game, though, it's pretty dang good about telling you where to go and what you need to do, except at a few certain points, which I'll point out as they come up. Yeah, so I think we're about done, so I'm going to wrap up this episode, and stay tuned for the next episode where there's going to be actual gameplay. So check back here, and as always, thank you for watching, and have a great day. Let's get out of this town.